It's roughly 10,000 years ago. You're a human. You live on the western edge of a massive lake in what will one day be called Kenya, and your life, by every measure that matters, is good. The water is rich with fish. The soil around the shore is dark and soft. Your people, about 2 dozen of them, have camps set up on a gentle slope above the waterline, close enough to drink, far enough to sleep dry. You know everyone here. You've known most of them since before you could walk. There are children running between the shelters. There's a woman, 8 months pregnant, sitting near the fire. There's an old man with bad knees sharpening a bone point because that's what he's done every morning for 30 years. This is your world. It is small and warm and familiar. And sometime in the next few hours, every single one of you will be dead. Not from disease, not from famine, not from a flood or a lion or a fall, from other people. People who look like you, who speak something close to what you speak, who carry weapons made from the same materials yours are made from. They will come quickly. They will kill the men first, then the women, then the children. They will kill the pregnant woman. They will kill her unborn child. They will leave the bodies where they fall unburied, uncovered, face down in the lagoon sediment. And then they will leave. And no one will find your people for 10,000 years. That is not a story. That is an archaeological site. It's called Nataruk, and it is, as far as we currently know, the oldest clear evidence of a massacre in human history. Not a war, not a battle between armies, a massacre. One group of humans finding another group of humans and destroying them completely. So here's the question this video is really about. Were we always like this? The short answer is probably. The long answer is what this video is about. And the long answer is more unsettling, more complicated, and more human than you'd expect. Let's start with what was actually found, because the physical evidence is what makes Nataruk different from almost every other prehistoric violence site on record. In 2012, a team led by Marta Mirazon-Lar from Cambridge University began excavating a site on the southwestern shore of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya. What they uncovered, preserved in the lagoon sediment, were the remains of at least 27 individuals. Men, women, children. At least 8 of them were female. One of those females was in the late stages of pregnancy. The tiny bones of her unborn child were still inside her. Her hands and feet were positioned in a way that strongly suggests she had been bound. Let that sit with you. Of the 27 skeletons, at least 21 showed signs of violent trauma. Blunt force fractures to the skull, crushed cheekbones, broken knees, arrow or spear points made of obsidian volcanic glass still embedded in the bones. One man had an obsidian bladelet lodged in the left side of his skull. It had entered through the temple and stopped inside the cranial cavity. Another had fractures to both hands, the kind you get when you raise your arms to block a blow that's coming for your face. Those are called defensive fractures, and forensic scientists see them in modern murder victims. 10,000 years ago, the gesture was exactly the same. Nobody was spared. Nobody escaped. Nobody buried the dead. To understand why Nataruk happened, you need to understand where Nataruk happened. 10,000 years ago, Lake Turkana was significantly larger than it is today. The climate was wetter. The Sahara hadn't fully expanded yet, and the lake's western shore was a rich, marshy, resource-dense environment. Fish, shellfish, fresh water, fertile ground. This was prime real estate for semi-nomadic hunter-gatherer bands. And that's the key. This was not a farming village. These were not settled people with grain stores and walls and something obvious to steal. These were foragers, mobile people. People who moved with the seasons and carried almost everything they owned. The old assumption, the one baked into a century of anthropological theory, was that this kind of violence, organized group-on-group killing, only emerged after agriculture, after property, after surplus, after someone had something worth taking. Nataruk blows that apart. There's no evidence of a raid for resources here. No sign that anything was taken. The attackers killed everyone and left. Which means either they wanted the territory itself, the access to the lake, the fishing ground, the water, or they wanted something even simpler. They wanted the other group gone. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because for decades, There's been a quiet but fierce debate in anthropology about whether humans are naturally violent or whether violence is a product of civilization. It's one of the biggest questions in the field, and people have built entire careers on one side or the other. On one side, you've got what's sometimes called the Rousseau camp, named loosely after Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who argued that humans in a state of nature were essentially peaceful and that it was society, property, and inequality that corrupted us. In this view, hunter-gatherers were mostly cooperative, mostly egalitarian, and mostly nonviolent. War was invented. It came with farming, with cities, with kings. On the other side, you've got the Hobbes camp, after Thomas Hobbes, who wrote that life in a state of nature was solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. In this view, violence is baked into what we are. It predates agriculture, predates civilization, predates everything. We didn't learn to kill each other, we've always known how. Nataruk doesn't settle the debate, no single site can, but it lands a heavy blow on the Rousseau side. Because what you're looking at in that lakebed sediment is a group of pre-agricultural humans who were massacred systematically, completely with projectile weapons and blunt instruments by another group of pre-agricultural humans. No kings ordered this, no nation-state sanctioned it, no general planned a campaign. Somebody decided that those people on that stretch of shore should not exist anymore, and they made it happen. Here's a detail that most people miss when they hear about Nataruk, the obsidian. Obsidian doesn't come from everywhere. It's volcanic glass. You find it near volcanic sites, and in East Africa 10,000 years ago, the nearest reliable obsidian sources were a significant distance from the lake shore. That means the attackers either traveled with pre-made obsidian weapons, which implies planning, forethought, intent, or they had established trade routes that gave them access to materials the Nataruk group may not have had. Either way, this was not a spontaneous clash. You don't carry obsidian-tipped projectiles across the landscape on the off chance you'll run into someone to kill. You carry them because you're going somewhere, with a purpose. And when you get there, you use them on people who are sitting by a lagoon, probably not expecting what's about to happen. Some researchers have pointed out that a few of the Nataruk group did have obsidian tools of their own, which might suggest both groups had access to trade networks, and the conflict might have been between two similarly equipped bands. But even that reading doesn't soften the picture. It just means both sides were capable. Only one side attacked. I keep coming back to her, and I think you should too. Because her body tells us something that no amount of theoretical framing can explain away. She was found with her hands and feet in a position consistent with binding. That means someone restrained her before or during the attack. She was in the final weeks of pregnancy. She was not a threat. She was not holding a weapon. She was not capable of fleeing. And whoever did this to her did not care. There's a tendency, when we talk about prehistoric violence, to intellectualize it, to treat it as a data point, to say, well, intergroup conflict was adaptive and nod sagely and move on. And there's truth in that. Evolutionary psychology has real explanatory power. But when you're looking at the skeleton of a bound, pregnant woman who was killed and left face down in a lagoon, you have to hold both things at once, the explanation and the horror. The mechanism and the meaning. This was not abstract. This was not a statistic. This was a person, and somebody killed her. Nataruk is the oldest clear massacre site, but it is not alone, not even close. At Jebel Sahaba, a cemetery site in Sudan dating to roughly 13,000, 14,000 years ago, researchers found dozens of burials with embedded projectile points and healed and rehealed bone injuries, suggesting repeated violence over years. At Crow Creek in South Dakota, nearly 500 skeletons from around 1,325 CE showed evidence of scalping, dismemberment, and mass killing. At Eulau in Germany, roughly 4,600 years old, a family of four was buried together: a man, a woman, and two children, all killed violently, the mother's arms wrapped around her children. The deeper you dig, literally, the more violence you find. And not just between strangers. DNA analysis at several European Neolithic massacre sites, shown at Kilianstetten in Germany, Sparrenschletz in Austria, shows that the victims were often local residents and the attackers were often people from nearby communities. People who knew each other, people who might have traded with each other. people whose children might have played together. That's the pattern. It's not random, it's not rare, it's not an aberration. Organized, lethal, group on group violence appears everywhere humans appear. Before farming, before cities, before writing, before bronze, before anything we'd call civilization. We didn't invent war, we brought it with us. So why do we do it? If violence costs so much in energy, in risk, in the death of your own people, why has it persisted for tens of thousands of years? The uncomfortable evolutionary answer is because sometimes it works. If your group eliminates a competing group, you gain access to their territory, their water, their food sources, their potential mates. In a resource-scarce environment, and the Pleistocene was full of them, that arithmetic can tip toward aggression. Not every time, not inevitably, but often enough that the capacity for organized violence was maintained, generation after generation, across every continent where humans lived. Chimpanzees do it. Jane Goodall documented what she called the Gombe Chimpanzee War in the 1970s, a 4-year campaign in which one community of chimps systematically hunted and killed every male in a neighboring community. It was targeted, it was strategic, it was lethal, and it happened among our closest living relatives, which means the roots of this behavior may go back not thousands but millions of years. That does not mean it's inevitable. That does not mean it's justified. That does not mean every human group engaged in it, or that peace was impossible. It means the hardware was already there. The capacity for coordinated, premeditated, intergroup killing is not a bug in the human operating system. It's a feature. Let me leave you with one image, because I think it matters. 10,000 years ago, the night before everything ended, the people of Nataruk almost certainly sat around a fire. They talked, they ate, someone probably told a story, a child probably fell asleep against someone's side. The pregnant woman probably sat where the heat was best, because that's what pregnant women do in the cold. Someone probably laughed. Someone probably argued about something small and meaningless. Someone probably looked out at the dark water of the lake and thought about tomorrow. They were fully human. They loved and bickered and worried and rested and hoped. They had every emotion you have. They had every cognitive capacity you have. They told stories. They made tools. They cared for their injured and their old. They were, in every meaningful sense, us. And the people who killed them the next morning were also us. That's the thing about Nataruk. It doesn't let you draw a clean line between them and us, between primitive and modern, between violent and civilized. The killers weren't monsters. They were humans doing what humans have done for as long as humans have existed, protecting territory, eliminating competition, acting on fear or hatred or resource pressure or something we might never fully understand. We are the species that paints caves and buries our dead with flowers. We are also the species that binds a pregnant woman and leaves her in the mud. Both are true, both are old, both are ours. So here's my question for you, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. If you could go back, if you could stand on the shore of that ancient lake the morning before it happened, what would you do? Would you warn them? Would you try to stop it? Or would you just sit with them by the fire and let them have one more night? Leave it in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.